The Manhattan Mistakiela Martinez stepped out of her silver BMW, designer heels clicking against the graveled driveway as she surveyed the sprawling farmland before her. The late afternoon sun painted the valley in golden hues, but all she could see were dollar signs and development potential. At 28, she was the youngest partner at Morrison & Associates, Manhattan's most prestigious real estate law firm, and this deal would cement her reputation forever. Willowbrook Valley. She muttered, checking her phone for the third time. No signal, naturally. This place felt like stepping back 50 years. She grabbed her leather briefcase and walked toward the old farmhouse, mentally calculating square footage and profit margins. According to her research, this property belonged to some elderly farmer who was ready to sell. Simple transaction, she'd told her boss. In and out in 2 days, maybe 3, if there were complications. The sound of machinery drew her attention to a nearby field where a man worked beside a vintage tractor. He wore faded jeans and a gray t-shirt that clung to his muscular frame. His dark hair tousled from the wind. Even from a distance, she could tell he was younger than she'd expected for a farm worker. Alina approached confidently, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. "Excuse me," she called out, raising her voice over the engine noise. The man looked up, and Alina felt her breath catch. He had the most striking green eyes she'd ever seen, framed by sun-weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. When he smiled, it was genuine but cautious. "You must be the lawyer from the city," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Hiss. The voice was deep, with a slight southern drawl that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Alina Martinez." She extended her hand professionally. "And you are?" "Jake Thompson. I worked the land here." He shook her hand, his calloused palm rough against her smooth skin. The contact lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Well, Mr. Thompson, I'm here to finalize the purchase agreement for this property. I assume the owner is inside?" Something flickered across Jake's face. "He's not available right now. Maybe I can help you get settled instead." Alina frowned. She hadn't flown all the way from Manhattan to deal with hired help. "I really need to speak with the property owner directly. This is a significant transaction." "Sure it is," Jake said, his tone neutral. "But like I said, he's not available. You're welcome to wait at the house, though. There's fresh coffee inside." His casual dismissal irritated her. In New York, people jumped when she spoke. Here, this farm worker was treating her like she had all the time in the world. "Mr. Thompson, perhaps you don't understand the importance of this deal. My firm is prepared to make a very generous offer for this land." Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Ms. Martinez. The question is, do you understand what you're really trying to buy?" Before Alina could respond, a gust of wind sent her carefully styled hair flying and nearly knocked her off balance. Jake reached out instinctively, his strong hand steadying her arm. "Careful there," he said softly. "These old country roads can be tricky for city folks." Alina pulled away, flustered by the warmth of his touch and the way he was looking at her. "I'm fine, thank you. Just suit yourself," Jake said, returning to his work. "But you might want to trade those heels for something more practical if you plan on staying long." As Alina walked toward the farmhouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake Thompson was more than he seemed. There was something in his eyes, an intelligence and depth that didn't match his simple farm worker persona. And the way he'd spoken about the land with such protective reverence suggested a deeper connection than mere employment. Inside the cozy farmhouse, Alina found herself oddly charmed by the rustic decor and family photographs covering the mantel. The coffee was indeed fresh, and as she sipped it by the window, she watched Jake continue his work in the fading light. Something about this place was already getting under her skin, and that worried her more than she cared to admit. Stranded in Paradise, Zila woke to the sound of roosters crowing and immediately regretted not booking a hotel in the nearest town. The pull-out couch in the farmhouse living room had been surprisingly comfortable, but nothing could have prepared her for the complete culture shock of rural morning sounds. After a quick shower, she dressed in her second-best suit and headed outside, determined to locate the property owner and close this deal. Instead, she found Jake loading hay bales onto a truck, his movements efficient and powerful. "Morning," he called out, not pausing in his work. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," Alina replied curtly, then softened her tone. "Thank you for the accommodation." "When might I expect to speak with the owner?" Jake straightened, studying her with those penetrating green eyes. "He's still unavailable. But since you're here, maybe you'd like to see what you're planning to buy." Alina was about to protest when her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant back in Manhattan. The message made her blood run cold. Her biggest client was threatening to pull out of another deal if she didn't return immediately. "I need to get back to the city," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "Today? Might be a problem," Jake said, pointing to her BMW. "Noticed this morning your car's got a pretty significant oil leak. Tom's garage in town could fix it, but he's closed Sundays." Alina stared at her car in disbelief. Sure enough, a dark puddle had formed beneath the engine overnight. "This cannot be happening." "Afraid it is," Jake said, then surprised her by adding, "But maybe it's not such a bad thing. When's the last time you slowed down long enough to actually see where you are?" Something in his voice made her look around, really look, for the first time since arriving. The morning mist was lifting from the valley, revealing rolling hills dotted with wildflowers. The air was clean and sweet, filled with birdsong instead of car horns and sirens. "It's beautiful," she admitted reluctantly. "It is," Jake agreed. "Come on, let me show you around while we wait for Tom's garage to open tomorrow." Against her better judgment, Alina found herself following Jake across the property. He pointed out native plants, explained sustainable farming techniques, and shared stories about the land's history with obvious passion. "Planted these apple trees," he said, stopping beneath a gnarled old tree heavy with fruit. "For generations of my family have tended this orchard." "Your family works here too?" Lena asked. Jake's expression became guarded. "Something like that?" As they walked, Alina found herself genuinely interested in Jake's explanations about crop rotation, soil health, and water conservation. His knowledge was impressive, far beyond what she'd expect from a simple farmhand. "You seem to know an awful lot about agricultural management," she observed. "You pick things up," he said with a shrug. But there was something evasive in his manner. By afternoon, Lena had kicked off her heels and was sitting cross-legged in the grass beside a babbling creek, her suit jacket folded neatly beside her. Jake had packed a simple lunch of fresh bread, local cheese, and fruit from the orchard. "This is the most relaxed I've felt in years," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "City life that stressful?" Jake asked, settling beside her on the blanket. "You have no idea. 12-hour days, constant pressure, always fighting for the next big deal." She sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm actually living or just surviving." Jake studied her profile as she gazed across the water. "What made you become a lawyer?" "My father wanted me to have opportunities he never had. He worked construction. His whole life wanted me to use my brain instead of my back." Elena's voice grew soft. "He died when I was in college. I felt like I had to prove his sacrifices meant something." "Sounds like they did," Jake said gently. "Alina, not your father, not your boss, you." The question hung in the air between them. Alina turned to meet his gaze, and something electric passed between them. The space separating them seemed to shrink without either of them moving. "I don't know anymore," she whispered. Jake reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair. From her face, "Maybe that's okay." Maybe not knowing is the first step toward figuring it out. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Alina realized she hadn't thought about Manhattan or her cases or her career for hours. Instead, she found herself captivated by Jake's laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and the gentle strength in his calloused hands. When he suggested they head back to the house, she felt a pang of disappointment. The day had passed like a dream. Returning to reality felt harsh and unwelcome. That evening, as they sat on the porch sharing a bottle of local wine, Alina caught herself studying Jake's profile in the lamplight and wondering what it would be like to kiss him. Hearts in the Soil. Elena's third day in Willowbrook Valley began with her voluntarily trading her designer clothes for a pair of borrowed jeans and a simple cotton shirt. She'd found them folded outside her door with a note from Jake. "Thought you might want to get your hands dirty today." She found him in the vegetable garden, teaching a group of local children about companion planting, watching him interact with the kids, patient and gentle as he explained how tomatoes and basil helped each other grow. Alina felt her heart skip in an entirely unfamiliar way. Ms. Alina called out a little girl with pigtails. Mr. Jake says you're from the big city. Is it really made of concrete? Lena laughed, settling onto the ground beside them. Not all of it. But there are definitely more buildings than trees. That sounds sad, the girl said seriously. It is a little, Alina admitted, glancing at Jake. His smile was warm and encouraging. After the children left, Jake handed Alina a pair of gardening gloves. Ready to learn something new? I should warn you, I've killed every plant I've ever owned, she said, but took the gloves anyway. That's because you probably tried to control them instead of understanding what they needed, Jake said, kneeling beside a row of seedlings. Plants are like people. They thrive when they're cared for properly, not micromanaged, as they worked. Together, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same tools. Lena found herself hanging on Jake's every word. He taught her to read the soil, to recognize when plants needed water versus nutrients, to see the garden as an interconnected system rather than individual components. You're a natural, he said, as Alina successfully transplanted her first seedling. I have a good teacher, she replied, as their eyes meeting over the tiny plant. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Jake's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. Sorry, I need to take this, he said, stepping away to answer. Alina couldn't help overhearing fragments of his conversation. Board meeting next week. Environmental impact study. Double quotes. Sustainable development proposal. When he returned, she was waiting with raised eyebrows. That didn't sound like a typical farmhand conversation. Jake's expression became carefully neutral. Just some business about the land. Alina sensed he was hiding something, but the afternoon sun was warm, and she was enjoying this version of herself too much to push. Instead, she suggested they take a break by the pond. They sat on the wooden dock, their feet dangling in the cool water. Alina had never felt so at peace, so present in a single moment. Tell me about your life in the city, Jake said. Alina's cheeks warmed. No one's serious. My work doesn't leave much time for relationships. What about you? No, Jake said simply. Haven't found anyone who understands this life. It must be lonely sometimes. It was, he said quietly, turning to look at her. Until now. Alina's breath caught at the intensity in his voice. Slowly, Jake reached out to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Alina, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. Jake. When their lips finally met, it was soft at first, tentative and questioning. Then Alina's arms wound around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and consuming. She'd never been kissed like this, with such tender reverence yet passionate need. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Alina rested her forehead against his, overwhelmed by the force of her feelings. This is crazy, she whispered. I barely know you. Sometimes the heart knows things the mind hasn't. Figured out yet, Jake said, his hands tangling in her hair. As the evening approached, they walked back to the house hand in hand. Alina felt like she was floating, every nerve ending alive, with awareness of Jake's presence beside her that night. As they sat by the fireplace sharing stories from their childhoods, Alina found herself imagining a different life. One where she woke up to roosters instead of sirens, where her hands were dirty from honest work instead of stained with ink from contracts. What are you thinking about? Jake asked, noticing her distant expression. Just wondering what it would be like to stay, she admitted. Jake's eyes darkened with something that looked like hope mixed with pain. You could find out. It's not that simple, Alina said, though even as she spoke the words, she wondered if it actually could be. Why not? Because I have a life in New York. Responsibilities. A career I've worked years to build. What has that life given you besides stress and exhaustion? Jake challenged gently. Alina opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. What had it given her? Money, yes. To status, recognition, her father's dream fulfilled. But happiness? Contentment? Love? Those had been notably absent from her Manhattan existence. I need some air, she said, standing abruptly. Jake followed her onto the porch, where she stood gripping the railing and staring out at the star-filled sky. "I'm scared," she confessed, without turning around. Jake stepped up behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Of what? Of wanting this? Of wanting you? Of throwing away everything I've worked for on the basis of 3 days in paradise?" Jake turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "What if paradise isn't something you visit, Alina? What if it's something you choose?" Before she could respond, he kissed her again, and Elena let herself fall completely into the moment. Pushing aside all thoughts of tomorrow and consequences, and the life waiting for her back in the city, Alina woke to find Jake's side of the bed empty and cold. After their passionate night together, she'd expected to find him beside her. But instead there was only a note. "Had to handle some business. Back soon. Jay." She dressed quickly, her body still humming from their lovemaking, and decided to explore the property while waiting for his return. As she wandered through the barns and outbuildings, she noticed things that hadn't registered before. Expensive equipment, modern irrigation systems, and a small office tucked away behind the main barn. The office door was slightly ajar. Elena knew she shouldn't look, but curiosity got the better of her. What she found inside made her blood run cold. The walls were covered with architectural plans, environmental studies, and development proposals. But it was the letterhead that made her sink into the desk chair in shock. Thompson Agricultural Enterprises, Jacob Thompson, CEO. With trembling hands, she opened the filing cabinet. Inside were land deeds, tax records, and incorporation documents. That painted a very different picture than the simple farm worker Jake had presented himself to be. Jacob Thompson wasn't just an employee, he owned Thompson Agricultural Enterprises, which controlled over 10,000 acres throughout the valley, including the very property her firm was trying to acquire. Elena's phone buzzed with an urgent call from her boss, Richard Morrison. "Alina, where the hell are you? The client is breathing down my neck about the Willowbrook deal." "There's been a complication," Alina managed, her voice shaky. "What kind of complication? The landowner isn't who we thought. It's not some elderly farmer ready to sell. It's Jacob Thompson of Thompson Agricultural Enterprises." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Richard exploded. "Thompson, you have any idea who that is?" "He's been blocking development projects across 3 counties for the past 5 years. He's got environmental groups, local politicians, and half the state legislature in his pocket." Alina felt sick. "Richard, I need to tell you something else. I may have gotten personally involved with the situation." "How personally?" Before Alina could answer, she heard Jake's voice calling her name from outside. "I have to go," she whispered. Hanging up, Jake appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from concern to resignation as he took in the open files and Elena's stricken face. "You found out," he said simply. "Jacob Thompson," Alina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "CEO of Thompson Agricultural Enterprises, owner of 15,000 acres, an opponent of every development project in the region." Jake stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "Alina, let me explain." "Explain what?" "Ow. You've been lying to me from the moment we met." Alina stood, backing away from him. "Ow. Did you know who I was? What my firm was trying to do?" Yes, Jake said. Quietly, "I knew." The admission hit her like a physical blow. "So this was all what? Some elaborate game? Seduce the city lawyer and sabotage the deal?" "No." Jake moved toward her, but Alina held up a hand to stop him. "It started that way. I won't lie to you about that. Alina, what happened between us, what I feel for you, that's real." "How can I believe anything you say?" Elena's voice broke. "You let me think you were just a farm worker. You watched me condescend to you, treat you like hired help, and you said nothing. Because I wanted you to see the land first, to understand what we're trying to protect before you saw the politics and the money." Alina laughed bitterly. "There is no we, Jake. There never was. You're the enemy my firm has been fighting for months, and I'm the lawyer sent to destroy everything you love. We're on opposite sides of a war. Doesn't have to be that way, doesn't it?" Lena grabbed her phone, which was buzzing incessantly with calls from her office. "My career is on the line here. If my firm finds out I've been romantically involved with you, I'll be fired and probably disbarred for conflict of interest." Jake's face went pale. Alina, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. Alina's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. I fell in love with you, Jake. I was ready to change my entire life for someone who doesn't even exist. I do exist, Jake said desperately. The man you fell in love with, the one who showed you the garden and held you by the pond. That's me. The real me. The real you is a multimillionaire landowner who played me for a fool, Alina shot back. The real you? Let me pour my heart out about my insecurities and fears, while knowing exactly how to manipulate them. Her phone rang again, and this time she answered it. Richard's voice was sharp with panic. Alina, I need you back here immediately. The client is threatening to sue us for breach of contract if we don't deliver this deal. Whatever personal complications you've gotten yourself into, fix them or find another career. Alina hung up and looked at Jake with eyes full of pain and betrayal. I have to go back to New York. Alina, please, give me a chance to make this right. There is no making this right, she said, moving past him toward the door. We both got what we deserved. You protected your land, and I learned a valuable lesson about mixing business with pleasure. She packed her bags in the farmhouse. Jake pleaded with her to listen, to forgive him, to find a way forward together. But Alina's heart was too broken, her trust too shattered. Goodbye, Jake, she said as Tom from the garage arrived with her repaired car, or should I say Mr. Thompson? As she drove away from Willowbrook Valley, Alina couldn't stop the tears from falling. In 3 days, she'd found and lost the love of her life, and she wasn't sure she'd ever recover from either experience. Choosing love over ambition back in Manhattan, Alina threw herself into work with desperate intensity, trying to forget everything about Willowbrook Valley and the man who had broken her heart. For 2 weeks, she worked 18-hour days, barely, sleeping, existing on coffee and determination. But Richard Morrison was losing patience. Alina, I don't care about your hurt feelings. Our client wants that land, and Jacob Thompson is the only thing standing in the way. Find his weakness and exploit it. What if we can't acquire the property? Alina asked carefully. Then you better. Update your resume, Richard replied, coldly that evening. Alina sat in her Manhattan apartment, staring out at the city lights and thinking about stars over Willowbrook Valley. Her assistant had left a stack of research on Jake's company, and despite herself, Alina found herself reading about his environmental initiatives, his support for local farmers, and his innovative, sustainable agriculture programs, everything. She read painted a picture of a man dedicated to protecting the land and supporting his community, not the manipulative villain she'd convinced herself he was. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Alina, please call me. We need to talk. Jake, she deleted it without responding, but 10 minutes later, another message arrived. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But what we had was real, and I think you know that. Alina's hands shook as she typed back, what we had was a lie. His response came immediately. Then why are you crying? Alina looked at her reflection in the dark window and saw tears streaming down her face. How did he know her so well after only a few days? The next morning brought devastating news. Her biggest client, furious about the delays in the Willowbrook deal, had pulled out of 3 other projects and was threatening legal action. Richard called Alina into his office with a grim expression. You're off the case, he announced. I'm sending Davidson to close the deal. Davidson will destroy that valley, Alina protested. That's not your concern anymore. As of today, you're on probation. One more mistake, and you're out. Alina returned to her office feeling numb. She'd worked so hard to build her career only to watch it crumble because she'd fallen in love with the wrong man. Or had she? That afternoon, Alina made a decision that surprised even her. She called in sick and booked a flight back to Willowbrook Valley. She found Jake in the orchard where they'd shared their first meal together. He looked up in shock as she approached, his face haggard with sleeplessness. Alina, what are you doing here? I needed to see you, she said simply, to ask you something. Anything. If I hadn't found out about your company, if you'd told me the truth from the beginning, would we have had a chance? Jake set down his pruning shears and stepped closer. Yes. Absolutely yes. Then why didn't you trust me enough to be honest? Jake ran his hands through his hair, looking tormented. Because I'd been fighting developers for so long, I forgot that some of them might be good people just doing their jobs. I saw the threat before I saw the woman, and now I see the most incredible woman I've ever met, and I'm terrified I've lost her forever. Alina felt her resolve weakening. My boss sent another lawyer to close the deal. Davidson will get your land, no matter what it takes. Let him try, Jake said quietly. But Alina, I don't care about the land anymore if it means losing you. Don't say that. This valley is your life. You could be my life, Jake said, stepping closer. If you'll let me prove that what we had was real. Alina looked around at the valley she'd come to love, then back at the man who'd shown her what her heart truly wanted. I quit my job, she said suddenly. What? On the drive here I called Richard and quit. After I finish handling the transition of my cases, I'm free. Jake's eyes widened with hope. What will you do? Well, Alina said, a smile tugging at her lips. I hear there's a certain agricultural company that might need legal counsel. Someone who understands both business and environmental law. Jake's face broke into the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I choose love over ambition. I choose this valley over Manhattan. Just choose you, Jake Thompson, whatever your name is. Jake swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, they were both crying and smiling at the same time. I love you, Elena Martinez, he whispered against her lips. I love you too, she whispered back. All of you, even the parts that drive me crazy. 6 months later, Alina stood in a flowing white dress. Beneath the old apple tree, where they'd first shared a meal, surrounded by the community that had become her family. She exchanged vows with the man who'd taught her that sometimes the best life isn't the one you plan, but the one you're brave enough to choose. As they danced under the stars to music played by local farmers on fiddles and guitars, Alina realized she'd never been happier. She traded designer suits for jeans, boardrooms for barns, and ambition for love, and she'd never looked back. The end.